Yes, welcome. This is F a Rap Critic. I'm your boy Malik 16. And no, I don't think so. I don't think you know no show that can flow like we flow here on F a Rap Critic. If you don't catch the reference and you ain't catch the thumbnail that you just clicked on, we are talking about the classic debut album by the Brat, Funkdafied, which turns 30 years old. Yeah, man. A big deal for me. I am a big The Brat fan. Shout out to The Brat. Would love to have you on the show to talk about your sophomore album. Tried to get you on for this one, but just one of the rappers in the game that I feel does not get her flowers as often or as widely and as big as she should. So I'm here to do that. Of course, with my usual neutralized, unbiased kind of guide through these bullet points. This is category one, where we go over the product, the album itself. And I'm just here to be the expert voice to break down 10 dimensions that you yourself can vote on and rank if you visit therapuler.com, or if you just want to take the easy way and leave your rankings here, you are more than welcome to do that. Don't forget to take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel so you can do that. Why not? All right. We visit Chicago every now and then on this channel. We've done it a few times. It's always a pleasure because Chicago has produced some of the greatest MCs, some of the greatest artists. A little background on this album. It was released on So So Def Records through their joint venture with Columbia. And Brat was discovered by Chris Smith from Criss Cross on a tour stop in Chicago, brought to Jermaine Dupri, and history as we know it was made, led to her being featured on Criss Cross's sophomore album on their single The Bomb, the album title track. And from that, there was anticipation built up for her album, culminating in the release of this. And with no further ado, the first dimension that we talk about in category one is going to be dimension one, quality of the production. Either surprisingly to some of you or not surprising at all, this entire album is helmed by Jermaine Dupri behind the boards. There's co-production credit given to Manuel Seal on about 4 or so tracks, and Manuel Seal was also found and credited as doing the background vocals on a lot of the songs, helping with the hook construction there. So with Jermaine Dupri production, it's always interesting because it's always a 50-50 split if he's got a large hand in a project of easily recognizable sampled songs and original production, which is hit or miss. When you compare the catalog of Jermaine Dupri internally from the songs that he produced that were original production that wound up being hits from the ones that are samples, it's maybe about a, let's say 65-35 split, right? And so with that in mind, I do want to give Jermaine Dupri credit for the samples that were used on this album. There are some really top-notch and out-the-box thinking ways of sampling happening here. There's still a live instrumentation element here, and you can tell there's a lot of pulling from random spaces, but very timely spaces too. And I say timely in 2 different manners, right? So timely meaning some of the songs that are sampled from were not released too long before this album came out. And then the other meaning of timing is, as we discussed on the Warren G Regulate episode, is that this is now the G-Funk era, as well as the Dr. Dre inspired era in the wake of the Chronic and Doggy Style albums. So there's this big push by the industry to match that sound, because it's the dominant sound that's running the airways when it comes to rap. It's what people assume the audience wanted. The Brat being from Chicago and Jermaine Dupri being based in Atlanta doesn't exempt them from that, because Atlanta was still cultivating its own sound at that point. Shout out to Organized Noise. Once again, rest in peace to Rico Wade for really helping that, because I've mentioned when we were talking about trap music, the T.I. episode, shout out to A.R. Shaw, how the early groundwork for Atlanta production was laid by producers like Dallas Austin and Jermaine Dupri, who were just kind of shaping pop sounds and creating hit music, which forces you to pull from the trendy influences. So, again, this album is no exception. You're going to hear a lot of that influence in the production here. A lot of the funky worm, a lot of the synthesizers that modulate, just because that was the dominant sound of the time. And I want to believe that maybe this was Jermaine Dupri's offer to a Midwest rapper, not knowing how different Midwest rap may have been from West Coast rap, right? I don't know if he would have gave these same beats to Criss Cross. The Bomb album, there's a less refined version of him playing with that sound on there. So yeah, it's gonna be evident on tracks like the introductory track. You're gonna hear it on singles like For All Y'all, things that were intended to be singles perhaps, like Mind Blowing and May the Funk Be With You. And then on the harder tracks like Ain't No Thing, definitely sounds like it was going for album track off Chronic or Doggy Style. And where Jermaine probably shines the most is when he's not trying to do that and just branching out. And so we talk about the sampling on here, because it's chasing this West Coast feel and this funk alignment. Of course, it's pulling from some of the suspected spaces. It's pulling from the Barcades. There's an interpretation of This Masquerade by George Benson, but the way it's used, you wouldn't know it. And that's what I mean about the cleverness of the sampling here. They're still proud enough in their musicality to want to replay and interpolate these songs instead of directly sampling them. So you're getting an interpretation of pretty much just the bass line of a piece, the main groove piece of the George Benson This Masquerade song. Same thing can be said about the way Zapp and Roger is sampled on For All Y'all with the song Heartbreak, ironically not credited on the album originally, and then replayed versions of the main melody where the groove goes somewhere else, because you're just kind of interpolating it and paying homage to it without trying to rip it directly from the song. So the biggest examples of this are what happens on Funkdafied and the Give It To You version on the album. So that's 2 times that the same Isley Brothers song is sampled from 2 different parts of its 2 movements. And so Funkdafied famously uses the main recognizable groove of In Between the Sheets by the Isleys, one of their 1980s hits, right? So the doom 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 doom, but it's not played in the same chords, it's not played in the same keys, none of that. It's its own version of that groove. This is what old school producers prided themselves on. They're like, if I'm gonna sample, I'm gonna do it my way. It's a really interesting in-between area to fall on as a producer, because there's producers who just don't sample, there's producers who their whole thing is sampling, and then you get these middle ground producers who are like, I'm gonna live somewhere in between both of those. And that's what happens with Jermaine Dupri and Manuel Seal on here. And so Give It To You takes from the bass line from the second movement, the part that everybody really turns up to, the I like the way you mistreat me, that one. So that's getting utilized. For the remix version, there's way more live instrumentation, there's horns, there's drums that hit much harder and more like prominently. For the album version, it's really just stripped down. It uses the drum line from All Night Long, Mary J. and Girls, one of the most classic songs, one of my favorite songs of all time, and that's it. And that just kind of plays throughout. As far as the unexpected samples, you get things like looping Fear by Lenny Kravitz for the Come and Get Some, which makes it the most standout beat on the album because it's different from everything. It deviates from trying to be this synthesized funk ride, and it's still funk because of the wah-wah effect of the guitar, but the way the drums come in and out are unlike nothing else on the album. It's like a giddy-up kind of drumming pattern, and it allows for a different pocket for the Brat to rap in. It feels the most boom bap as well, by effect. The other song, Fire It Up, I recognized the sample immediately, but could not put my finger on the name of the song. And when I realized again that it is an interpolation utilizing the main bass line from the end of Under the Bridge by Red Hot Chili Peppers, I was like, wow, that's genius. Again, with the the synth, the modulated synth sounds going in and out that gives it a mood to it. But no one's thinking of sampling from these places in 1994, especially because these songs came out very close. These are songs from 1989 and the early 90s. So it's like you're not borrowing from these oldies but goldies. You're going right to something that was pretty contemporary or pretty recent in music history, and you're going into rock spaces. So that's what I say about the form of sampling here. There's this proud, I'm going to play it myself and groove it out my way. It's almost like when singers remake songs, and instead of sounding just like the original singer, they put their trademark style on it. And then the other thing of sampling from these unorthodox places, which gives it a fresh feeling for hip-hop at the time. And so shout out to Jermaine Dupri and Manuel Seal for being bold and daring enough to do that kind of stuff. They were very free. You can tell, as much as it was very trend-minded and very derivative and borrowing from what was popular, they found a way to still own it and make it their own. All these things are something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when you think about the quality of the production. It takes us to dimension 2, the cohesiveness of the album. All right, it's a short album, and the idea is that the shorter the album, the less room for error, the less room for skippables. When we think about the sequencing, maybe they weren't clear on which songs would wind up being singles. And so the placement didn't do that thing where you put all your singles in the beginning of the album and leave the rest of it to be deep cuts that people may or may not listen further to hear. So that winds up being an advantage for an invested listener, because you get the second single as the second song, the first single as the fourth song, and the third single as the final song. So there's some space between it. And you get other songs that had the potential to be singles. And the focus, now that it's not on putting all the hits in the beginning, could be on just the ride that the album wants to take you through. And there's really only 2 modalities on this album. There's the harder songs, and then there are the groovier songs, which I guess could be considered the lighter songs. So track 1 is going to be in that harder bag. I mentioned how Ain't No Thing is supposed to be a harder song, and Come and Get Some is another one. Wow, Mind Blowing, For All Y'all, May the Funk Be With You are the lighter, groovier songs. And naturally, yes, Funkdafied itself. There was space for Give It To You and Fire It Up to just be there. They just float somewhere in the existence. And so that's where the attention of the sequences seemed to go. Like, all right, let's give you enough of the up and down in areas where this is that. So the album starts off hard and ends somewhere in a territory that sums up both of those modalities. So that's pretty much the way it goes. And it makes this album, I think, more digestible than it should be, because again, sequencing is everything. Since it only has those 2 modalities, bunching all those songs together that are one type in one part of the album, and then bunching all the other songs in one part of the album that are the same, could have that splitting the listening experience effect. Like, okay, I heard all the hard songs, I'm not interested in these soft songs. Or I heard all the soft songs, oh, these other songs, oh, that's too rappy for me, that's too hard. Now you got to sit through it and get the full Brat experience. It also allows you some space in between where it's not Brat by herself on the mic and there's other folks. So you get to hear her alone, you get to hear her with a guest, you get to hear her alone, you get to hear her with a guest or someone else on the mic, and then it goes in. So all those things are something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 3, the intentional mood and tone of the album. Okay, so Brat is going on record saying that she fashioned her early rapping style after Twista, which is really interesting because in the early 90s he was Tongue Twister, but in this same year he reemerged as the Twista we know him now to be with his shelved or, super underground album Resurrection, where he came out, hard with the style that he has just improved on ever since and just become a GOAT with. And so when I hear Brat saying that, I'm thinking when she first started putting pen to paper, Tongue Twister was like mind blowing for her. But as she went into the development of the style that we came to know from her for this debut, she stated that she viewed herself as like a female Snoop. It's very important for me to point out that in 1994, the three biggest rappers in conversation were Biggie, Snoop, and Meth, right? There's plenty of other famous rappers orbiting that, but those were the three if we were going to be talking about Mount Rushmore or Big Three of 94, or the 1994 version of Biggie, Jay-Z, and Nas. It's Biggie, Snoop, and Method Man. The Brat is one of those satellite rappers that becomes a hot topic of that year, right? And so it kind of is a no-brainer to fashion yourself after one of the biggest rappers out there when you're thinking about your debut, when you think about filling a void that has not been filled in hip-hop. So we had Boss, who came before her. And, interestingly enough, Boss is sampled on the song Fire It Up. And, rest in peace to Boss. She just passed away earlier this year. But where Boss's image didn't land her any real super mainstream success, it seemed like maybe the timing and the presentation and Jermaine Dupri's vision and backing for the Brat made the stars line up perfectly. Think about another album that came out this year, 1994, Outkast's debut. Dre has said that, they came out sounding like the West Coast rap that influenced them, including Souls of Mischief and other rappers that just, everybody just wanted that West Coast sound for a minute until, what Wu-Tang and Biggie did for the East Coast caused the resurgence in that direction. But because of that, a female rapper who can give us that Snoop feel successfully while still having her own identity seemed like a very viable thing. And so that's the tone that's being set. If you hear a young Da Brat in interviews describing what her album's about, she's like, yeah, it's just like what me and my people do all day. We just like to smoke and chill, and I'm repping my crew. Oh, that sounds like all the Doggy Styles album is about, with the addition of maybe some pimping rhetoric. But yeah, that's it's musings of a young black teenage kind of ethic coming into hip-hop. The Brat was 20 years old when she dropped this debut. So, you can imagine the circumference of what's important is very small at that point, especially if she's living in a more traditionally masculine patterned way. West side of Chicago ain't no joke. You come up hard. And the Brat wasn't in a space where she cared about flexing femininity on this album. It was about rap skills and just being herself, which at the time meant, this hard edge smokeaholic who loves to rap. And she says that she was also very influenced by the Dog Pound, which ironically came back to bite her because when the album dropped, she got a lot of comparisons from critics, not from fans, but critics who were saying that she was trying to sound like that. There's not any complex agendas here. There's no layers. It is what it is on this album. All these things are something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 4, the song distinction versus the repetition of words and sounds. As always stated on this channel, when there's one main producer, you run the risk of having unintentional repetition or intentional repetition with the production, with the soundscape, because one person could be limited in range. As limited as the range is on this album, it seems very intentional because they were going for a certain sound for the majority of the album. So Jermaine Dupri and Manuel still deliver that and create this landscape that I think only because it is a short album, 9 tracks, doesn't go too far into redundancy. They are safe. Even the singing sounds different on each song. So that's the sonics. Let's talk about the words. That rule works the same way for lyrics. The Brat will repeat a lot of the same things. Sometimes it's because it's intentional branding. Sometimes it's because of just lazy writing. So for one, She does use parts of verses from the songs that wound up becoming singles for hooks on other songs. So you're gonna hear on For All Y'all, she's gonna do that. It's the Brat tat 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 coming back on that. Something she said on Funkdafied, right? When you hear Come and Get Some, it's the I know that you know that I know, that whole thing. Fire It Up is in refrains on some of the songs. So, like, there's a lot of interplay and interchangeable exchange of wording and catchphrases and things like that that are used that are just repurposed and regifted to the listener. Uh, Again, because it's a short album, I feel like it exists in the safe zone where it's not enough for you to feel like she's lazy, because it's like, oh, I'm branding. Get familiar with the things that you recognize me by. Cool. She's gonna say West Side, Chicago a couple times. She's gonna say So Def more than anything else. She's gonna say her name. She's gonna spell it out. Other than that, there's some lazy writing that happens on track one, where she curses more than on anywhere else. Which, when you compare it to, and this is me thinking from a rap writer's mind, or from a writer's mind, knowing what the process is usually like, and taking into account that the Brat is one of the few freestylers of the game, especially in the 90s. If you've ever heard the Brat freestyle, she does that. Snoop's first album, you can tell most of it was freestyle. She's fashioning herself after Snoop. It would be no surprise that a track like track one, it was mostly freestyle, because it sounds like she was running out of things to say. So I'm going to curse here, and Jermaine Dupri's just going to hype it up. And yeah, there's like 18 curse words, only 2 verses, and I'm sure those verses are only like 40 words per verse. So that's like half your verse, half your song, you know what I mean? So yeah, not inspired. She's rhyming shit with shit, things like that, or rhyming this with this. But on a track, in comparison, on a track like Mind Blowing, which is probably her most lyrical song on here besides Funkdafied, you see the extents that her pen can go to when she's focused. So there's a fair share of repetition here. You can debate and question how much of it was intentional and how much of it is kind of recycled wording, just because it's like, we gotta turn this album in. I wasn't prepared to be this like artistic album maker. I'm just a person that loves rap and smoking, and here's what I got. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. It takes us to Dimension 5. So I mentioned, yes, it is a 9-track album. No skits, no interludes. There's a little part at the end of Fire It Up that can be considered like interlude-ish, the requisite smoker skit. But other than that, they keep the party flowing all through. Out of 9 songs, you're not getting a lot of substantial material. Fire It Up is probably the most topical song on here. Everything else is just braggadocio rap. That's it. Brat has never been one who could be accused of being your deep political, socially conscious rapper ever. So with that, that's something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Takes us to Dimension 6, the features. Okay, Jermaine Dupri is featured prominently all throughout this album, doing backgrounds. They do this creative thing where he'll slip in and say like a phrase or a refrain, or he'll just say a word. Like on the track Ain't No Thing, it's either him and Manuel Seal, or Manuel Seal saying nigga, which is excessive. And a lot of that helps, thread the album together. You understand that Jermaine Dupri is going to be on here as much as Diddy's on the Bad Boy project, even more so because I think Jermaine Dupri found his kismet synergy with the Brat. Whereas with everyone else, he's like, yeah, I'm presenting my new act. I'm the boss. Here's my So Def artist. It was never positioned that way with Jermaine Dupri and the Brat's relationship, because they always came across like Jermaine Dupri saw her and treated her as an equal. Even on Funkdafied, when he's like, open up, let the funk flow in, he says, a newfound friend. He doesn't say my new artist, my protege. None of that. And so none of the effect that you're seeing him do with most of his other acts. This is probably what it was probably what Lotto was afraid of and why she didn't sign to So Def. So there's this equal space and freedom that's given to the Brat, even if his pen is helping behind the scenes on some parts. It's obvious from the gate they co-write. There's a new tag team in town. There's a brother sister thing going on here, and it seemed very organic and genuine, not forced, not hey Brad, let me get on the mic. It's like, hey, this is what I want to do. She even says at the end of Give It To You, she's like, yo JD, help me finish this. And he only says word up hey one time. She rides out and does it the rest. So he's not even trying to hog the mic in the glory. He's just there. There are some writing credits given to Chris Kelly, rest in peace, aka the Mac Daddy, and Chris Cross on 2 songs, including Give It To You. And then he's featured on Come and Get Some. And man, it's a very, you could argue that it's a very well-placed feature. It doesn't seem try hard. He comes in and does his part. He does the last verse. He's not trying to do too much. And it's the perfect position in between what these 2 albums from Criss Cross represent. It's the growth of a rapper from the bomb going into the iteration that you'd see on Young, Rich, and Dangerous. So, a little bit to show I'm not a kid rapper anymore, but not too tough. He's not, going as hard as our other guests. Probably the most random guess here, but it all starts to make sense when you think of the 1994 landscape and picture that was set by this album. The artist formerly known as YT or Light or Mr. Light from the Bush Babies on Ain't No Thing. He does the intro, the requisite early 90s staple of having rough reggae intro or outro on your song. He comes in and he's talking about licking shots, spraying Uzis, hitting up cars, stuff that you never hear him do on a Bush Babies track. And for the life of me, I'm like, where, as I revisited the Give It To You video the other day, and it starts off with you seeing the Bush Babies walking into the mansion where the main video takes place. And I'm like, the Bush Babies, that seems like such a random cameo in the midst of all these other folk that are in the video. But now it makes sense. He's featured on the album. They were probably working in the studio at the same time. There's a connection there that someone with deeper industry knowledge than me would probably be able to highlight and elaborate on. But there he is, adding, again, another tone to a song right in the middle of the album where it probably needed just another voice to break up any monotony of just hearing the Brat straight through. Every good album needs some deviation of the tones and some break from just the So Def camp, showing that the Brat is not scared to work with folk outside, but the rest of the guests remain in-house. I mentioned Emmanuel Sill does all that funky uncle sounding singing, which again, is the final era for a lot of that, which was very popular from West Coast music. It's him credited as doing that. And then you have Candy, shout out to my cousin-in-law Candy Barras, or Candy Tucker, doing the background vocals on For All Y'all, and her other escape frenemy, Latasha Scott, doing the background singing on Made a Funk Beat, which interesting that they weren't used as more prominent features, like just having Escape on the hooks for one of those songs to make it a So Def party. It just shows you that JD really wanted this to be a the Brat arrival. Like, this is you. There's someone doing like a fake Snoop type of talking at the end of Ain't No Thing, but I don't know if that's Jermaine or Manuel. Voices changed over the years. I don't know what Manuel's talking voice sound like, but it was definitely going for that, back for another one, like that kind of feel. But those are the features, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to Dimension 7, the question of, does the weakest song or do the weakest songs on the album bring it down? You know what I'm going to say? Subjective. It's up to you. Are there even any weak songs on this album? It's only 9 tracks. I will say track 1 is very forgettable, both rhyme-wise and beat-wise. And I think the intention was to try to set the rough tone. Yeah, it winds up being harsher than it needs to be, and it doesn't have the effect that it was going for. Other than that, some of the singing is outdated, and some of the beats themselves are kind of cemented in that time where that was the popping sound that may not be as digestible now. But that's all up to you to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, how much that impacts the album, good or bad. All right, that takes us to Dimension 8, Mass Appeal. All right, so Def is not an underground label. They were in the R&B business. They were in the hip hop business. Most of what they put out was going platinum or gold, or at least getting lots of radio play on the airwaves. Jermaine Dupri is no stranger to hit making at this point, and it's obvious that as much as they want to position the Brat as the female answer to Snoop and this hardcore artist, they also want to move units and continue that airplay. And so the act of balancing those two, credit has to be given, because this is not easy to pull off. We see it even now with trap and again, hardcore rap always being the dominant and most popular style of rap, with the exception of our big three, whoever you think belongs there nowadays. It's not as easy as people would think it sounds. You are not going to make it unless you make it palatable in some way. When you hear tracks like For All Y'all and Give It To You, the roughness of what the Brat's saying is kind of evened out by the smoothness of the beats that she's doing it over. When you got somebody singing on your hook, it just takes away the volatility of it. And she's not letting up on those songs. The only song where she kind of lets up on is Funkdafied as a single, because she's focusing that strictly on the raps. The other element to this is the videos themselves. And so coming out with a pool house party type of video with a 70s theme, again, you're playing off of what's already popular. 1 year later, ODB would do this with the Shimmy Shimmy Y'all video with his Soul Train aesthetic, and the year before, or shoot, this same year, Snoop's Doggy Dog World video, showing this Players Convention, pimps with furs, all 70s soul styled. This is a popular theme. This is a dominant aesthetic that's easy to gravitate towards. It's the old with the new. Pool house videos are just starting to become a thing. Biggie just dropped Juicy's video that had that going on, old and the new. So much so that the Brat said her mom was in this video. You know what I mean? That's how much of a nod to how cool it was to revisit 70s style. It's 90s, so that's 20 years ago. Just like it's cool now for kids to revisit the late 90s and early 2000s, because that was that same distance apart. So that helps. Your next video is cute. It's this little sister, big sister dynamic. You got Raven Simone, who was super popular at this time, coming off of the end of the Cosby Show. She's starting her own rap career, probably the most recognizable black child actor at that time, who bears some similarity to the Brat style, right? So they play that up, and it's a cool follow-up, but it's the Give It To You video that seals the deal. Right now, the album is going platinum. This is making history, because the Brat is the first female rapper in history at that point to go platinum off a solo album. There had been history broken by female rap debut with, that existing in the first place, or with singles, but this is the first rap album by a female soloist to go platinum. So she broke records, she broke barriers, she changed the game. And the Give It To You remix, the decision to make a remix version instead of releasing the one from the album as the main single for a third, is like a celebration of that. This is a video where we're seeing everyone that you didn't know. This is a foundational video for the Atlanta hip hop scene that we would come to see take over the game, but also a peak mid 90s video for everything that was already popular. So the most abstract feature you have there are the Bush Babies. Everything else makes sense. You got Keith Murray walking in. You got T-Boz in the video dancing with Mary J. Blige, one of the most gold moments of that whole video. And it looks like everyone is genuinely having fun. People pulling up, they're arriving, slow-mo. You're really getting to see who's in there. You got Biggie just sitting with women around him and bottles of champagne. You got Diddy doing what Diddy does, whatever Diddy does. You got Bill Bellamy as your comic relief, because, you know, most rap videos, having a comedian in there is a thing. The 90s really created this as a thing. It still continues to this day, but Bill Bellamy was just getting his name out from the Def Comedy Jam circuits. You also have Kirk and Rashida Frost. You got Goody Mob up in the video. You got MC Light. It really is a party. And it just so happens that the Brat is performing. And if you look at the Brat's movement, her gestures, her motioning, and how she's performing, you can tell she was born to do it. She is a showman. She was just so in her bag. It didn't feel like, all right, I'm in a video, let me do this scene. Who knows what goes on behind the scene? But your job is to make the viewers believe that you love what you're doing. And she looks so comfortable around all those celebrities that are supposedly bigger than her. But again, she just made history. So who's bigger? Who gonna check her? And it felt like everybody was celebrating that aspect with her. So yeah, all of that helps to sell the story of the Brat. If all that was in the tank was Funkdafied, and for all y'all, this album may have still gone platinum because the Funkdafied single itself went platinum. It just, you know, again, the strength of that momentum, the strength of the buzz helped. She also wound up having a single with Biggie that year off the Bad Boy soundtrack called The B-Side, and that just extends that popularity. And that's how you market an artist back in the day, when you used to put them on the R&B singles, the remixes, to get people really familiar with their name, or to have them feeling like they're everywhere, they're abundant, they're like out there, like, oh, let me check this out. Jermaine Dupri is a master at that. That's what made his legacy of So Def. That's what built that empire. So you care less about, you know, is she a female rapper? The Brat was able to easily dismantle a lot of that and disarm that, just showcasing dope songs and rap skills. So there was no need for a love song. There's no need for anything else, because she's giving you radio and club songs, but she's still giving you, like, I can rap. So those three boxes are checked off. That's all you need. Also, you know, capitalizing off a formula that's already working. This is when Coolio songs were on the airwaves. Warren G, again, that West Coast soaking up. Her songs were not very far from that stuff. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Takes us to my favorite dimension 9, 3 I's: impact, innovation, influence. All right. The impact, as I stated, this is the first debut album by a female solo rapper to go platinum. It exceeded the expectations of Jermaine Dupri, and to an extent the Brat herself, because there's a article where it states that the Brat was told by JD, hey, you know, don't get your hopes too high. Traditionally, female rappers go gold at most. That's all that's ever been done. And depending on where you read, it says the Brat was determined to go beyond that. Or the Brat was like, it ain't no thing. I'm down for whatever, you know, however it goes. I'm just here. I will state, going platinum was not the pinnacle or even the super goal back in 1994. Maybe in the background, behind the scenes industry conversation way, but for mainstream, the general public didn't even know what platinum was until the Bad Boy takeover with Biggie, and platinum was just the only conversation. Jay-Z like escalated that too, like, we only go platinum, we only wear platinum. Before that, it was just about being a hit. It was a successful working of the formula. We had BWP, we had Boss, we had all these manufactured hard acts. We had Nikki D, we had Rage, we had Heather B coming out. But for someone to get up and do it, who knows what inspired the next generation of female rappers, because I think the Brat's always existed in her own bubble, in her own lane, in her own class. and she's exceeded being seen as just a female rapper, which is why her name really doesn't come up in those conversations. They start with the Queen Latifahs, MC Lights, Salt and Peppers, and then they just kind of fast forward to the Lil Kims and Foxy Browns, and then they go to like Lauryn Hill and the current ilk that we have after Nicki Minaj. But yeah, because of that, I think the Brat is one of those special artists. I remember personally the impact that seeing her arrival had on me. I just was like, oh, this is fresh, this is fly. From a rapper standpoint, you can tell she breathes this, she lives this. Again, I've seen her freestyle, I've heard her, really grow. And it's funny, I think she's more associated with like a faster rap style now, but she's not really rapping fast on this album. We'll talk about that more in category 2. But yeah, I mean, shoot, I'd go as far as say the Brat has influenced me as a rapper, because she's done some things on the mic as her career progressed that I think rappers are just now catching up to. And so I don't hear enough female rappers giving her flowers. I don't hear enough rappers in general. I don't hear hip hop itself acknowledging the Brat's impact on the game. It's almost like she got lost in time because maybe her style hasn't changed. She still dresses the way she dressed on this album. Like there was this period where she was like dressing super feminine and sexy, and then she reverted back. She's like, well, F that. I ain't trying to, be a crossover TRL darling anymore. Let me go back to what's comfortable for me. And, it could be argued that aesthetic played a role because she kind of looked like a female Snoop, but I've also read that because she also looked like a kid, but was a grown woman, and there's this compelling factor. And it reminds me of what happened with Ray Shrimmer. Like, when you hear Ray Shrimmer and you see them, you think they're children. These are grown men who are a lot older than a lot of the other popular rappers in the game, even during their debut. But that has an effect. It attracts more for some reason. As much as people don't like kid rappers, if you play kind of with that effect of having a childlike quality but doing grown activity or being grown, it casts a wider net for some reason. Something to look into. Definitely something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. For sure, Give It To You gets played in my car at any party that I'm DJing any day. The remix, of course, that's a timeless song. Speaking of timeless, Final Dimension 10, the overall timelessness and uniqueness of this album. I mentioned how, because it was indeed kind of fashioning itself after the trend of the time, it will have a little bit of a dated effect. Maybe not a cringy dated effect, but listening to it, you have to kind of reset your ears to that time. If I was introducing this album to a kid right now, I feel like they would either think it's really dope because it's groovy and it lends itself so much to funk feeling that it just sounds like an extension of funk music, or they'd be like, oh, this is that old head stuff. So, even some of the ways that they're saying their words over the beat is that early 90s going into mid 90s style. And so that kind of cuts some of its lifespan and shelf life. Other than that, what Brat is saying on here is not really dated. It's still all the stuff that rappers talk about, especially if we're talking about rappers who don't get that deep. It's not very different from a Travis Scott or a Ray Shrimmer or, type album. Or shoot, if we talk about what's going on in woman-led hip-hop right now, it would fit right in. She's not making any references to like Sega Genesis or any technology that was out at the time. She's not really saying the year until Give It To You. She's like, it's like that for the 9-5. Because it is the first record-breaking album of its kind, the overall timelessness is tied to the impact and that place in history, and that's why it's in the classic conversation. But other than that, it is totally up to you to determine on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. And with that, we conclude the category 1 breakdown and review of the classic album Funkdafied by the Brat. Join us for the category 2 review where we go over the rap performance on this album. Y'all know what it is. Till next time, F a Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to Beth.